She left with a suitcase, promising she just needed time. I knew from the way she packed her favorite mug that it wasn't just a break. But it all started at our kitchen table. It was a Sunday evening, quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. We just cleared away dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, something simple, and I was rinsing the plates when she said my name. Not casual, not soft, measured, like she'd practiced it in her head before it reached her lips. Mark. I turned, dish towel still in my hands, and there she was, sitting at the table, back straight, hands folded on the wood like a student about to recite something memorized. Her eyes didn't meet mine right away. They lingered on the placemats, the salt shaker, anywhere but me. "I think I need a break," she said. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. Break. Like we were some appliance that could be unplugged, set aside, and restarted later. For a moment, I didn't react. I just stood there, water dripping from the plate in my hand into the sink, waiting for her to laugh or backtrack. But she didn't. She sat firm, shoulders stiff, her face calm in that unsettling way. Too calm, the way people look when they've rehearsed every line. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. Instead, there was a strange stillness in me. Because deep down, before she even finished the sentence, I already knew this wasn't just a pause button. This was the first step out the door. Most men would have argued. Most men would have pushed back against the word break, as if debating the terms could somehow change what was already written in her eyes. But I didn't. I didn't ask why or for how long. I didn't lean across the table, grabbing at the air like I could hold her in place. I simply folded the dish towel, set it down, and nodded. "All right," I said. Her lips parted like she hadn't expected that answer. She blinked a few times, gathering herself, before forcing a small nod of her own. Inside, I felt the ground tilt, but not the way you'd expect. It wasn't panic. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. If she was already here, at the table, rehearsed and steady, then she'd been gone long before tonight. A break wasn't something you blurt out. It's something you build toward quietly, while the other person sits across from you thinking everything's fine. So I accepted it. Not because I was indifferent, but because I knew chasing her would mean running after someone who had already slipped from my grasp. There's a kind of strength in calm. It unsettles the person who expected drama, who rehearsed their lines against your pleading. My calmness turned the script in her hands to dust. "Okay," I repeated, softer this time. I picked up the dish towel again and finished drying the plate, moving as if the world hadn't just shifted in our kitchen. Because, in a way, it hadn't. Not really. The shift had already happened weeks ago. This was just the moment she decided to let me see it. The thing that struck me most wasn't what she said, but how she said it. Her voice didn't wobble, not even once. It was measured, flat, almost professional, like she was delivering a presentation at work instead of unraveling a marriage at our kitchen table. Every word was chosen carefully, each pause timed just right, as though she had stood in front of the bathroom mirror practicing this very speech until she could say it without trembling. "I just need time," she told me, her tone even, unhurried. "It's not forever. I just need to clear my head, figure out who I am outside of us." If I hadn't been watching her so closely, I might have believed it. But I noticed the way her fingers laced and unlaced themselves on the table, the way her eyes avoided mine and focused instead on the placemat, the salt shaker, the grooves in the wood. The voice was steady, The body wasn't. It's a strange thing, recognizing the performance in someone you thought you knew better than anyone else. I had heard her true voice hundreds of times. When she was laughing in her sleep, when she was angry enough to slam the car door, when she was excited about something small, like finding the perfect peaches at the market. This wasn't that voice. This was a script. And scripts, no matter how well delivered, always leave gaps. She said time, but didn't say how much. She said not forever, but couldn't look me in the eye when she said it. She said outside of us, but her hand drifted to her suitcase handle before she caught herself. Her words were polished, but the truth was jagged, sticking out at the edges where she hadn't rehearsed enough to hide it. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about needing space. This was about creating distance wide enough to live a different life, if only for a while. And the steadiness of her voice made it clear she'd already decided. The morning after she left, the house sounded different. Not louder, not quieter, just different. The kind of different you notice when something's been moved that shouldn't be, like a chair slightly out of place. Her absence was loud in small ways. No hairdryer winding down the hall. No half-sipped coffee cooling on the counter while she rushed to get ready. No quick kiss at the door as she headed out. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the click of the thermostat, and my own footsteps echoing sharper than usual across the hardwood. The first night, I half expected my phone to buzz. Some text saying she missed me, that she was safe, that she'd be back soon. It didn't. The screen stayed black, and the silence stretched. By the third day, I'd stopped glancing at my phone every hour. By the fifth, I realized I wasn't even listening for her key in the lock anymore. The strangest part wasn't the emptiness. It was the calm. I'd braced myself for a flood of anger, for the weight of loneliness, for nights staring at the ceiling wondering what she was doing. But instead, I found myself moving through each day with a quiet sort of steadiness. I cooked for one. I watched the shows she never liked. I left the lights on longer than she would have tolerated. The house wasn't haunted. It was just mine now. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was a mirror. It showed me just how much space she'd already carved out between us long before she walked out with that suitcase. And with each passing day of that first week, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like waking up. By the second week, the silence no longer pressed on me. It settled instead, like dust on a shelf. Noticeable at first, but soon just part of the room. I started to realize how much noise she used to bring into the house. Not arguments or shouting, just constant presence. The hum of her TV shows in the background, the endless notifications chiming from her phone, the questions tossed my way about errands or bills or weekend plans. With her gone, the air was clearer, lighter. At first, I filled the quiet with sound. Music playing while I cooked, podcasts running as I worked around the house, the TV flickering late into the night. But slowly, I began to turn those things off. I found myself sitting in the stillness, not restless, but steady. Breathing felt easier when there wasn't someone's expectations hitching a ride on every exhale. I noticed things I hadn't in years. The way the afternoon sun painted golden squares on the living room floor. The faint creak in the hallway I used to tune out. The soft rhythm of my own breath while I sat with a book open on my lap. Silence stopped feeling like something missing and started feeling like something given. A gift I hadn't asked for, but one I found myself grateful to have. Because in that quiet, I began to hear myself again. Not her voice shaping the day, not her moods dictating the temperature of the room. Just me.
my thoughts, my choices, my time. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of forgetting what this peace felt like if I ever let her back in. It's funny the things you notice after someone leaves. Not the big, obvious gaps. Those hit you right away. It's the small details. The ones that whisper the truth louder than any explanation could. The first week, I thought nothing of it. Clothes missing from the closet, her suitcase gone, the usual. But by the second week, I started paying attention to the subtler absences. Her favorite mug, the red one with the chipped handle, wasn't in the drying rack. That mug had followed her everywhere, from our first apartment to this house. She wouldn't even let me toss it when it cracked, said it had character. If she was planning on coming back after a short break, why would she pack something so small, so permanent? The bookshelf told the same story. 2 of her favorite novels were gone, the ones she always said she wanted to reread someday. You don't take books for a short stay with a friend. You take them when you're trying to carry home with you. I noticed her jewelry box too, the small one her grandmother had given her. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't full either. A few key pieces were missing, the kind you pack when you don't just want to be comfortable, but when you want to present yourself somewhere else. Each missing item was like a breadcrumb leading away from the story she'd tried to sell me. This wasn't about space or finding herself. This was about building a life without me, piece by piece, even if she hadn't admitted it out loud. And the more I noticed, the more I understood. She hadn't left room for temporary. She'd packed for permanence. The suitcase wasn't just filled with clothes. It was filled with intent. The mind lies to itself when it's protecting the heart. For the first week, I kept telling myself she'd be back, that this break was nothing more than a reset button, a way to clear the fog before we picked up where we left off. But by the second week, denial started to give way to the facts staring me in the face. She hadn't left like someone taking a breather. She'd left like someone preparing for absence. I sat on the edge of our bed one night, staring at the hollow space in the closet where her clothes once filled the bar. It wasn't just a few outfits she'd taken. It was her best dresses, her go-to heels, the jacket she wore in the fall. All the things you'd want if you were starting over, not just visiting family or crashing at a friend's apartment for a few weeks. I opened the nightstand drawer and noticed something else missing. The notebook where she scribbled thoughts, little to-do lists, sometimes even arguments we hadn't had yet but that she was planning to bring up later. That notebook had lived in that drawer for years. Now it's gone. The kitchen confirmed what I already knew. Not only was her favorite mug missing, but so was her French press, the one she swore made coffee taste better than any machine. Who takes their French press on a short break? Nobody. You take it when you're setting up shop somewhere else. And then there was the photo, a small frame that had sat on her desk for as long as I could remember. Her and me on the pier, the sun setting behind us, wind whipping her hair across her smile. I didn't see it when I walked past her desk that week. The frame had been removed. No dust outline, no explanation. Just gone. That one stung the most. Because you don't pack a photograph if you're planning to come back. You leave it behind to anchor you, to remind you of where your roots are. If she'd taken it, it meant she wanted the memory, not the future. And that's when the weight of it finally hit me. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't about needing space. This was about creating a version of herself that didn't include me. And she wanted to build it somewhere else, with her mug, her books, her jewelry, her picture of us turned into a picture of her past. I sat there in the quiet, and for the first time, I let the truth land. She hadn't left to find herself. She'd left because she already had. And that self didn't need me anymore.
Oddly enough, once I accepted that, the hurt dulled. It wasn't gone, but it was manageable. Like a wound you finally stop prodding, letting it start to scab. The silence around me no longer felt like waiting. It felt like proof. Proof that I could live in it without collapsing. Proof that she wasn't the only one capable of surviving apart. And with that realization, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't my loss at all. Maybe it was hers. It was my brother who finally cut through the last threads of denial I'd been holding on to. We met up at a diner one Saturday morning, the kind of place we'd been going to since we were kids. Greasy eggs, coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and booths that stuck to your shirt if you leaned back too far. He slid into the seat across from me, gave me that look only an older brother can give, and said, "So, you gonna tell me what's going on, or do I have to drag it out of you?" I told him the basics. She asked for a break, she left, she said it was temporary. I didn't tell him about the missing mug, or the photo frame, or the French press, but he didn't need details. He just shook his head and leaned back. "She's gone, man." I frowned. "She said it's not forever." He snorted into his coffee. "If someone packs their suitcase and walks out the door, they're not looking for forever. They're looking for a test drive. And if they come back, it's not because they realized what they had. It's because what they went chasing didn't work out." I hated how much sense it made. "You don't sound surprised," I muttered. "Because I'm not," he said. "You've been walking on eggshells with her for a while. I noticed it every time we got together. The way you checked your phone like you were waiting for instructions. The way you skipped things because she wasn't in the mood. She's been building her exit longer than you realized." That stung, because it was true. "She'll be back," he added, stabbing at his eggs with his fork. "They always come back. But the question is, do you even want her to?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the steam curling from my coffee and thought about the quiet in my house, the calm had started to find in it. I thought about how much lighter life had felt without waiting for her moods to dictate the pace of my day. Finally, I shook my head. "I don't know." He set his fork down and leaned forward. "Then here's your answer. If you're not sure you want her back now, before she even tries to spin some story, then you probably already know the truth. You're better off without her." His bluntness cut deeper than her steady, rehearsed voice ever could. Because her words had been designed to soothe, to confuse. His, they stripped everything down to the core. And I realized my brother was right. She'd left me with silence. And in that silence, I was starting to breathe again. Why would I ever let her take that away? It was almost 5 weeks to the day when I heard the knock. By then, I had built a rhythm. Mornings started with the gym, evenings ended with books or long drives, and the house felt less like an abandoned space and more like mine. I had stopped waiting for her. I had stopped listening for her key in the lock. But there she was. When I opened the door, she stood on the porch with the same suitcase she had dragged out, her hair tied back in a loose bun, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. She wore the jacket she'd packed, the one that used to hang in our closet, and it looked worn, as if it had seen more nights out than she wanted to admit. "Hi," she said, forcing a smile. It was the same voice she'd used at the kitchen table, rehearsed and careful, except this time the edges were fraying. She looked past me, into the living room, as though expecting the space to still be shaped around her. Like she could just step back in and the world would rearrange itself to fit her again. "I'm back," she added, almost like she was testing the words on her tongue. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. There was no anger boiling up, no rush of relief, just a strange, steady calm. "What back from what?" I asked. She blinked, surprised. From the break, from everything."
Her voice cracked then, and the rehearsed script started slipping. I made a mistake, Mark. I thought I needed time. I thought I needed space. But I see now, I just needed you. I shouldn't have left. Her hand tightened on the suitcase handle, her knuckles white. For the first time, I noticed how heavy it looked. Like it wasn't just filled with clothes, but with everything she'd done in those weeks away. She shifted her weight, eyes glossing over. "Can we talk, please?" I looked at her standing there, at the suitcase, at the jacket, at the desperate way she tried to smile through the cracks. And all I could think was, she'd left with a lie, and now she was back with another. Because you don't pack favorite mugs and framed photos if you're planning to return. You don't disappear into silence if you're still committed. You don't come back with excuses if you left with the truth. She wanted back in, but not because of love. Because whatever she had chased out there hadn't held her up. And now, she wanted me to catch her. She stepped inside before I even answered, dragging the suitcase over the threshold like she was reclaiming lost ground. I didn't stop her, but I didn't help either. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the performance begin. She set the suitcase down and turned to me with watery eyes. "It wasn't what you think," she said quickly. Like if she could get those words out fast enough, they might erase whatever images were already forming in my head.
I didn't reply. I let the silence stretch, and in that silence, her excuses started to stumble out. I needed time. I needed to feel independent again. I stayed with a friend for a while, did some thinking, tried to figure myself out. Her hands moved nervously as she spoke, painting the air with half-truths. Then the cracks showed. The friend, well, he wasn't just a friend, but it didn't mean anything. She said it like tossing scraps to a dog, hoping I'd settle for less than the whole meal. I stayed quiet. Her voice rose, defensive now. It was just a mistake, Mark. Just me being stupid, trying to see if the grass was greener. But it wasn't. It wasn't at all. I realized what I had here, what I almost threw away. I don't want to lose you. There it was, the truth, dressed up as an apology. She hadn't left to find herself. She'd left to find someone else. And when that experiment failed, she came back to the life she had abandoned, hoping it would still be waiting, like a porch light left on. I looked at her then, not the way I used to, with love softening the edges, but clearly, plainly, like you see a stranger on the street. The excuses didn't soften the blow. They sharpened it, because excuses meant she wasn't sorry for what she'd done, only sorry that it hadn't worked out. She reached for me, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Please, Mark, don't let this end us. I swear it won't happen again. Just give me another chance." But standing there, hearing the truth beneath her words, I knew what she was really asking. Not for forgiveness, but for safety. She wanted the home she'd walked out of, the man she thought would always be here to catch her when she fell. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't that man anymore. Her words echoed in the living room, clashing against the walls that had been so still these past weeks. I could see the panic building in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as if trying to grab hold of something solid. Me, us, the life she'd so carelessly set down. But I didn't move. I thought of the nights I'd sat alone at that kitchen table, staring at the spot where her mug used to be. I thought of the empty closet, the missing photo frame, the silence she left behind. I thought of the calm I'd found in her absence, the quiet that no longer felt like loneliness, but freedom. And then I thought of her standing here now, suitcase in hand, spinning excuses into apologies, hoping I would mistake them for sincerity. "No," I said finally, my voice steady. She froze, as if she hadn't heard me right. "What do you mean, no?"
I mean, you can't stay here. Not anymore. Her tears came harder then, spilling fast. Mark, please, don't do this. We can work through it. I made a mistake. You made a choice, I cut in, calm but sharp. You chose to leave. You chose to find someone else. And now you're choosing to come back, not because you love me, but because it didn't work out for you out there. Her face crumpled. She stepped closer, reaching for me, but I stepped back. This house was a home once, I said, looking around at the walls, the furniture, the life we'd built. But you walked out of it. You turned it into a pit stop, a place to come back to when the grass wasn't greener. And I'm not going to be your safety net. Not now, not ever again. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we could have had. She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly, shoulders shaking. Her suitcase stood by the door like it knew where it belonged, outside. Finally, I opened the door and stepped aside. Go, I said. She looked at me one last time, as if hoping to find some crack in my resolve, some hint of the man who once would have begged her to stay. But he wasn't there anymore. She picked up her suitcase and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click, final and certain. And just like that, I chose myself. When the door clicked shut, the house was silent again. But this time, the silence didn't press on me or stretch out like a wound. It settled, calm, final. I stood there for a while, staring at the spot where her suitcase had been, at the faint scuff marks the wheels had left on the hardwood. A month ago, I might have looked at those marks as evidence of loss. Now, they felt like proof of release. She had called it a break. She had dressed it up as self-discovery, as needing time. But I knew the truth from the moment she packed her favorite mug, from the way she rehearsed her lines at the kitchen table. It wasn't a break. It was an exit disguised as hesitation. And yet, in leaving, she gave me something I hadn't realized I needed. She gave me distance. She gave me quiet. She gave me the space to see that my life didn't need to orbit hers to be whole. For weeks, I thought abandonment was the worst thing that could happen to me. But as the days passed, I realized it was the very thing that freed me. It forced me to stand on my own again, to remember what I valued when I wasn't bending myself to fit her shifting moods. Her return only confirmed it. She hadn't come back with love in her heart. She came back with excuses, with desperation, with fear of being left with nothing. And for once, I didn't mistake her tears for truth. I saw them for what they were. Sympathy for herself, not remorse for me. Choosing not to let her stay wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. Because sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is to walk away. And sometimes the greatest strength you can find is refusing to let them walk back in. Freedom rarely arrives wrapped neatly. More often, it comes disguised as heartbreak, silence, or abandonment. But if you stand still long enough to look at it clearly, you'll see it for what it really is, a second chance at yourself. And that's exactly what I was left with when the door closed for the last time.